'Cause I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. I've travelled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. Been to Tullamore, Seymour, Lismore, Mooloolaba, Nambour, Roochdore, Kilmore, Marillaba, Birdsville, Emmaville, Wallaville, Connemara, Connemara, Strathround, Proserpine, Alladala, Darwin, Gingin, Lillaquen, Muckilla, Wallumbilla, Bougainville, Cumberland, Ramakilla. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man.
Yes. We have been to Keith before, but we thought, well, here's an opportunity to go back to Keith and to give him a chance to be on the wireless, because he hasn't been on the wireless for at least 17 minutes. Rob Cameron, welcome to Two Blokes Chatting Radio Show.
Good morning, Neil and Grant. Lovely to be with you. And a technically, geographically correction, I am in the town of Bordertown, 44 kilometres from Keith, where the community radio station 5TCB is. But I'm still, heart is connected to Keith. So let's concentrate on Keith, shall we?
Oh, no, we can do both, because we've never been to Bordertown on Regional Roundup, but we have been to Keith before.
Yeah, you have indeed. Look, it's good, sort of good to be back here, where I spent 3 years of my life, and certainly very good and nostalgically to go back to 5TCB, where my community radio journey started, and we've all three of us, with Grant and yourself, started in different places, but the heart and soul is definitely in community radio, and it's still functioning, and a very important part of the fabric over here, because they really only have the ABC and 5TCB to listen to, so it's a huge part of the local radio network.
Excellent.
Now, tell me, Rob, what are you doing over there exactly? You're visiting family, or...?
Well, it's more just to catch up with friends. I try to get over here as often as possible, because the town of Keith and the community left a big impression on me, and it's 11 months since I've been here, and the weekend opened up for the opportunity to come over, and it's a very important local footy game, Keith versus Mundalla, which would be like Collingwood versus Carlton, or...
So, are Keith versing Mundalla today?
Keith are versing Mundalla. That came up on the radio this morning that I did over here. Someone was talking about the local hockey, and someone was versing someone. Yes, it was...
What happened last time they versed each other?
Mundalla won a close one. Mundalla won the grand final last year by a couple of points, so...
are they traditional rivals?
They are very much traditional rivals. It's Crows versus
Versing
Tigers.
Right, okay.
The Keith Football Club used to wear Collingwood jumpers, and they moved competitions where there was already a team wearing Collingwood jumpers, and they were forced to change. They adopted the Crows and have kept that colour ever since. Nicely done.
So what's it like at a day at the footy in Keith, Rob?
Well, it's very similar to a day in the footy at Anakie or Inverleigh or Bannockburn. It's just the hub of the community. It's really important, probably more so because of a little isolation. The closest town to Keith is Tintinara, 41 k's away. They actually play footy in a different competition. Keith have to travel to Penola to play in this comp. That's 150 kilometres away.
Wow.
So the communities are very isolated, and therefore the footy netball clubs become far more important to the community than, say, East Geelong or Thompson would in a town like Geelong. And that's not being derogatory, it's just the reality of it, that the football netball clubs are genuinely the heart and soul of the place.
Now, are there any famous people other than yourself that have been through Keith, Rob?
Well, I think the most famous, and a name came up this morning, there's a gentleman who's playing his 400th game today at Penola, and he remembers fondly playing on Tony Modra, who played in a premiership for Keith in 2007. So that's the sort of name that swings through. And also today playing for Padthaway is a fellow by the name of Daniel Menzel, who played footy at Geelong and Sydney. He's lining up at full forward for Padthaway today in this competition. So there's a couple of names that have come and played here.
But I think the interesting thing, both of those players, I think, have something in common, and that is that they had played their AFL career before attending Padthaway and Keith. Am I right in saying there was a young fella who came up through the ranks at Keith and played AFL football for a team in the north and a team in the west? His name is Jack Redden.
Jack Redden, indeed, is a Keith boy, as is Simon Cox, who played for Hawthorn and the Western Bulldogs. He is a Keith product. And I'm standing in Bordertown where there's a young fella by the name of Lincoln McCarthy, who played his junior footy, and he now plays with the Brisbane Lions, of course, after having played at Geelong. So there's and Lockie Neal, his club of Kaiby Bolide, he plays in this competition as well. So there's a lot of AFL connection with this part of the world.
And I guess the thing, and Brisbane have certainly used this to their advantage in terms of bringing kids down from places like that to the Big Smoke. It doesn't really matter whether they go to Adelaide or to Melbourne or indeed to Sydney and Brisbane, because they're having to relocate anyway. Whereas a lot of the kids that grow up in Melbourne, for example, they get a bit sad if they get drafted. This bloke Harley Reid, who apparently can play footy a bit, has allegedly said he's not going to go to West Coast. The next day he came out and said, "I never said any such thing. That's a journalist making it up," which is surprising in its own right.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, you may not be aware, Neil, you may not have heard this, but Lincoln McCarthy and Lachie Neale are apparently good mates.
Is that the case? That's never, ever been reported in the press. I'm glad you've come through with the scoop, because it would be disappointing
I mentioned once.
if we had never, ever heard that before. So you are over there for this weekend, and again next weekend we may in fact utilise your services on the Two Blokes Chatting Radio Show regional roundup segment, because you're going to be somewhere else.
Yes, we're jumping in the camper van and heading to Halls Gap, a place that is much, much loved. It's a beautiful part of the world. The Grampians and Halls Gap is going to be next weekend's regional roundup, and I'll have a little bit more information about what's happening locally. But over here at the moment, it's all agriculture. There's no doubt about it. There's a great agricultural part of the world. Both towns' economies, as is the case in many people we've spoken to on regional roundup, but the economy of the place is very much centred on the success or failure of agriculture, and at this stage it looks like a booming year. I spent some time this morning with a local farmer, and things are going well. They've had plenty of rain, things are growing well, so another booming year. And when farmers have money, the community has money, because they're very, very good at spending it.
What are they growing?
They're growing canola, they're growing faba beans, they're growing wheat and barley. You go a little bit further away and you might get some lentils, but it's very much the core product, and of course sheep and cattle still very much part of the local community as well.
I spent yesterday in the company of a significant number of experts in the world of irrigation, and there was a very good presentation by a fellow from AgVic, a chap whose name was Dale Gray, and Dale was giving us his thoughts on the El Nino La Nina thing that everyone is very concerned about, and for the next year, because it's going to be so dry. And he's saying, you know what, it's only probably 50-50 that it will be a bad year. So that's good news for the farmers too. You can tell them I said that.
Yeah. And speaking of agriculture, this is a very unique area for agriculture and irrigation, because the lucerne, the product that is grown for animal feed, some call it alfalfa,
yes,
if you like, the American term, but lucerne are grown over here. Some call Keith the lucerne capital of Australia, and a lot of irrigation happens here, but it's odd that there's no rivers or dams in this neck of the woods. All the water comes from down in the ground, all pumped out of the ground, and many believe that the water that comes to this neck of the woods actually falls in central Australia and gets in these underwater tables and travels down here. It's quite extraordinary, the science of it all, but all the water underground, no rivers, lakes, streams around this place at all, so it's definitely no good. Johnny Didge would not like it over here at all.
That's a damn shame.
It is a damn shame.
Oh, see how you did that?
Thank you very much. Robert, we wish you well for your trip to Keith and to Bordertown, and we trust that you will drive safely on the way home. Now, the thing to remember about Halls Gap, of course, is here's a shameless plug for the Grampians Wine podcast. If you listen to that, you might recognise a voice. And they do Shiraz very, very nicely in that part of the world, which could be handy for you after about 7:30 tonight.
Yes, indeed. For those of you who don't know, I'm a bit of a Pinot Gris man, and Neil Butler will be buying me a bottle of that after Geelong beat Brisbane tonight. But if, of course, as is normally the case, the umpires gang up on Geelong and cause us to lose, I will buy you a bottle of Shiraz, Neil.
And, of course, we do say gamble responsibly.
Yes. Rob, are you going to be able to watch the game today, or you'll be watching the local footy?
I'll be watching the local football today, without doubt, Keith versus Mundalla, but tonight I'll probably be somewhere near a screen watching the Cats and the Lions. What time do they actually play today?
4:35 Melbourne time.
Oh, yes. Well, we'll be fine. We'll be finishing here locally at about 5 o'clock Melbourne time, so I'll tune in at quarter time.
Because what's the time in Keith at the moment? 1978? Thank you very much. Rob Cameron, it's always nice to chat to you, often when you're sitting on the other side of the desk, but as Dan Eddy said to us earlier today, we're both very handsome when we're on the radio, and I think that's pretty much your case. The further away you are, the more handsome you are.
Well done, boys, and good luck to all the listeners at, what state is it? No, 94.7 The Pulse, that's it.
Yes, we're taking care of business.
Yeah, good on you, boys.
Thank you very much.
Have a great trip, Rob.
See you, mate.
Talk soon.
Rob Cameron, former co-host of the Two Blokes. No, that's not fair. No, he will be back in a couple of weeks. If that's okay, if you want to take a couple of weeks off.
We'll
great.
do 2 weeks each and we'll come
see
back
how you
again.
go, yeah.